what do we do with this, right? There's a lot of rules we hear about in this gospel. So what do you think of when you think of rules? Some people love rules because they know exactly what's expected of them, and they can also see what everyone else is doing wrong who doesn't keep the rules. But some of us, if you give us a rule, we're going to try to break it, right? Rules are meant to be broken. Picasso said, learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. Douglas MacArthur said, you are remembered for the rules you break. Jesus is aware as he speaks to the people, and this is continuation from the Beatitudes, that the people have been under such oppressive rules, both by the Romans and by the religious leaders of their day. They had taken the laws of God that were meant to help us to live whole lives and made them ways to manipulate, abuse, and control the masses. They used the rules as a way to exploit. They would exploit the poor, especially the illiterate, and then they would somehow use the rules to justify their own greed and their lust. And so Jesus, when he says to the crowd, you have heard it said, but I say to you, anytime Jesus does that, you better get ready. That he's going to unpack it and help us to see where God and God's love wins the day. So these rules that Jesus comes with constantly point us to relationships. But he's also calling out those in authority to say, you like rules so much? You want to follow it to the letter of the law? That's what happens, is all you end up with is laws and rules. There are not people and there is no relationship. All you get are rules. And what you get, as some theologians have said, is a lot of people with poked out eyes and cut off hands, right? If we take it literally. That is not what Jesus is asking us to do. What he's asking us to do is to see where God created us and gave us life. And then said, how do you live as free people? This is how you do it. You take care of each other. You find ways to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. It goes back to the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments were given as by a God who took us away from bondage. Think about what God says when the Ten Commandments are given. I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord of the Exodus. I am the Lord who emancipated you. I am the Lord of new promises. These words were spoken to people in Moses' day who had only known slavery. They had been slaves for so long that nobody knew anyone who had ever been free. They might have heard stories, but it was generations for hundreds of years who had been slaves. And what happens when we're slaves and we find freedom? We don't always know how to live. We have seen this over and over again in countries post-colonialism that were taken over, their natural resources were taken over, the people had to answer to a dictator or to another country, and when they gained freedom, they weren't sure what to do with it because all they had known were being subjects of a state. And we have to learn again how to be free. So it begins with the Ten Commandments, where God says, you're free now. You're completely free. You are not slaves to anyone. So here's how to live a full and vibrant life. You love the Lord your God. Oh yeah, and take a Sabbath day. Imagine how powerful that commandment was to people who had never had a day off. All they had known was slavery. And then he goes on to say, this is how you live with each other. Because all you've known as slaves is to answer to the masters and then to be beat or killed for not doing what's asked of you. Here's how you live with mutuality. And Jesus continues this theme as he says, these are given to you as gift, as free people. You're already righteous because God has declared you right with God. Now you get to act as free people. And here's how to do it. You love your neighbor more than you love some law or rule that you can beat them up with. You love your neighbor more than you love being right at everything and catching people messing up. Because if the law is like the leaders of the day, or like being slaves, what happens is it's just insatiable. All that we end up with is trying to feel bad enough and doing enough to earn God's love. What it produces is anxiety and fear in us. What it produces is us being suspect of the other, especially strangers. But when the law is seen as freedom and, oh good, now I know what to do. Life goes a lot better if I take a day off. Just ask my kids if I don't get a day off. Life goes a lot better if I'm not trying to worship money and fame and fortune and I put God first. Money, fame, and fortune might follow, but I worship God. And things go a lot better if I'm not stealing your stuff from you. And if I'm not gossiping and bearing false witness. It's about wholeness, not about restrictions. And Jesus takes it to this extreme. It's a lot of sarcasm. He says, you want that? That's what it looks like. And what you end up with is horror. Look at the freedom to which I have called you. That I have given you freedom, and now I told you how to live into that freedom. Some of you know the name of Gregory Boyle, the priest who wrote Tattoos of the Heart. He tells a story of an LA church that was in the projects. And the church noticed 25 years ago how many homeless, especially immigrant, migrant people there were living on the streets around their church. So they decided during the week to open their church up for the homeless men to sleep there. And this was a great idea, and the church was so excited. Until it wasn't. Because on Sunday mornings, even though the priest and some women came early, they would sprinkle the carpet with Love My Carpet and vacuum. They would light candles and plant potpourri in strategic places. They would burn incense every single week. It still stunk. It stunk like people who were homeless and needed a place to sleep. And the grumblings got louder. So one day during a sermon, the priest in the middle of the sermon said, "This church smells. What does it smell like?" And if you ever want the congregation to quit looking at you, a preacher asked a question like that, all eyes looked out the window or at their hands or digging through their purses. And he said it again, "What does this church smell like?" An older man in the back who never really cared what people thought about him said, "It smells like feet." And the priest says, "Why does it smell like feet?" And a lady said, "Because we let homeless men sleep here." And then he said, "Why do we let homeless men sleep here?" And somebody said, "Because we committed to it." And why did we commit to this? Because Jesus told us to. And he said, "What does this church smell like?" He said, "It smells like commitment." That's what it smells like. We are beloved children of God. We have been told we are free, and now here's how to live that way. And so often throughout history, we've taken the Ten Commandments or the other laws of God and made them into the extreme like Jesus addresses in the gospel. Like, what do I have to do? Like a student who says, what do I have to do to get an A? 92%? Okay, I'm going to get 92%. That's it. I'm not going to give it all. Instead to say, how do these help us to live full, vibrant lives? Why would Jesus give us these laws if it was only to catch us doing bad? Because you know what? I'm always going to do bad. I'm always going to mess up. That is not even a challenge to try to catch me. Instead, he says, you've been given the gift of each other. So what if we think of the Ten Commandments and the laws of God, not so much about self-improvement and what can I do to be recognized by God and my neighbor as keeping the commandments. Instead, what if we think of it as how to love our neighbor? How to care for our neighbor, how to have everyone at the table, how to notice that person who's struggling emotionally, physically, emotionally. How do we take time to do that? And Jesus said, here's how you do it. You love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and you love your neighbor as yourself. You're already saved. Here's how to live as free people. Quit trying so hard to meet the letter of the law and live as people who know freedom and grace and forgiveness. Ted Woodblaw is a Presbyterian pastor in Atlanta. And he tells about being at a meeting where this happened. He writes, at a Presbyterian meeting, it had been a long day of difficult votes. And finally, when the agenda was over, there was a motion to adjourn, and we were invited to stand for the closing prayer. Our moderator that year was particularly gifted by a rich devotional life. And when he led us in prayer, it's as if he's curling his toes over the edge of heaven itself. And we stood to pray on this occasion. He kept a long silence before he uttered these words. Lord, we are forever asking you for many things. And what you are forever giving us instead is the gift of one another. Jesus said, you have heard it said. You know the rules. You know the laws. You have heard it said, and that became oppressive, and that became death. But I say to you, there is grace, and there is life, and there is wholeness, and there is room for all in the kingdom of God. Amen. I'd like to close with a prayer by Walter Brueggemann, our one true home. Let us pray. God before and God behind, God for us and God for your own self, maker of heaven and earth, creator of sea and sky, governor of day and night, we give thanks for your ordered gift of life to us, for the rhythms that reassure, for the equilibriums that sustain, for the reliabilities that curb our anxieties. We treasure from you days to work and nights to rest. We cherish from you days to control and nights to yield. We savor from you days to plan and nights to dream. Be our day and our night, our heaven and our earth, our sea and our sky, and in the end, our true home.